Thanks a lot for coming in. Good morning. Happy to be here.
Something about this community appeals to you?
This is a wonderful place to live.
For Kelowna Now, this is Camp Mulgat. And we're joined by Peter Guo from MNP. I remember, Peter, when I first saw you, you were speaking to the Kelowna Chamber of Commerce, and it looked like almost an unbelievable scenario. I look around at that room, here are these buttoned-down, serious business types all there to hear about weed. It just seemed like it couldn't be real. 10 years ago, it wouldn't have happened. What's going on?
Well, what's going on is it's a legitimate industry. It is legal, as you know. After October last year, we were legal, and Canada celebrated, the world celebrated. I was sitting in, of all places, Vienna in Europe, and that day, I remember scanning the newswire, CNN, BBC, etc., and they were all talking about it.
Talking about Canada.
About Canada. And of course, there's all the tongue-in-cheek stuff like, well, they're really happy in Canada today because weed is legal, right? And, they cut to shots of Bruce Linton selling the first gram of weed in Newfoundland, right? But the other conversation that came out was, why haven't we done it? What is our approach to doing this, right? Why did the Canadians do it in such a measured way and end up approaching legalization in the birth of an industry? And they all talked about Canada showing the world the way, which was wonderful. Right. And it was quintessentially, a very proud moment for me sitting in that hotel room in Vienna, being Canadian, going, hey, we got here. And we were, like Canadians, quietly proud. The wonderful thing is the methodical way that it was opened up, the policy decisions, the legal framework are all things that I think as Canadians we can agree upon. Keeping it out of the hand of the bad guys, keeping it safe from our children, creating a business out of it, all those things. And so from
you
a
think
business...
that we've successfully checked all those boxes, keeping out of the hands of the bad guys? Isn't bad money coming in and taking over parts of it?
It's still happening, but we are moving the dial, right? If you don't start, you're forever stuck in that position.
Okay, so our position, you mentioned the world talks about Canada. Does that really give Canada an advantage? Does it give companies and investors in Canada an advantage?
Yeah, I'll give you 3 examples why it's given us an advantage. First of all, our cannabis companies are already, many of them, pursuing global strategies, finding very willing partners, business partners, as well as governments in various countries looking to Canada to figure out how do they bring cannabis, whether it's medicinal or recreational or otherwise, or even decriminalizing it in many states around the world. MNP did a global survey, and we showed how many states had gone into, hey, it's now legal for medicinal purposes. It's being decriminalized, or they're in the process of moving in that fashion. Right. And it's the same path we took to get there.
Okay, but we have this legalization which covers our whole country. Companies in the States have to leapfrog from state to state, and the rules are different everywhere. So this is a constant encumbrance upon their business growth that we don't have here. Advantage Canada.
Advantage Canada, and when I said states in my earlier comment, Kent, it was like country, nation states, right?
Okay.
Yeah, but you're right. The U.S. has this really fragmented model, and I believe in the U.S. it's a question of not if, but when it will be federally legal. And it'll be very interesting. Right now, every Democratic ticket in the U.S. has a free weed policy position. And it's not, I would not put it past the Trump administration of taking that same policy position, because why? Strategically, if they take that position, they just basically wipe out the competitive landscape of the Democrats, right? But what's happening, though, in the U.S. from a business perspective and from a consumer perspective, many states are putting this on ballots and they're passing, right? In terms of legalization. What that allows is the business to set up shop. The problem is they can't go across state borders. So from a business perspective, it's wonderful to enter some states, California being huge. But the challenge is the capital deployment to set up a factory or a grow or distribution network state by state is highly inefficient, right? But what are they learning? They're learning how to do it geography to geography. So when the states get legal or when they've come here, they're able to drop a location and iterate on that model.
Right.
The other thing that we're seeing, Ken, is the capital raises by U.S. companies looking to list, they can't list on the NYSE to NASDAQ.
Right.
They come and list here in Canada. The listings from U.S. companies outpaced the Canadian companies last year.
Right. Okay, so things are, like you say, eventually it may all be legal coast to coast in the States, but how does Canada maintain or extend its lead in this sector with countries like the States on our heels?
It was interesting. If you asked me this question, about 6 months, early this year, 2 or 3 months after legalization, I said, I'm troubled. I think we're going to squander our lead. Because what was happening was we were applying the same policy and legislative framework to the emerging edible space as we did with cultivation.
Right.
Plain sort of medical waste, white packaging, no way to differentiate. Could you imagine walking through your Safeway here and walking through the cereal or the potato chip aisle and everything was in white packaging? How would you pick between a kettle cooked chip, barbecue, sour cream, whatever, right?
Right.
That doesn't make any sense. And so for businesses to be able to address consumer demand and consumers to help businesses iterate and build better products, that chain was broken. And so what's changed since that time is yesterday, Health Canada said, we're going to start a new category. So edibles are coming. They've reaffirmed that.
Right.
It's still quite restrictive, edibles, vapes, beverages, topicals. But we're coming out with a CHP, Cannabis Health Products category, which bridges between that nutraceutical over-the-counter reality
Right.
and the heavily regulated, you can only buy this from cannabis retail, private, or government shops. That's going to be exciting. That's 2020. Why do I believe that allows us to keep moving forward from a leadership position? Because it starts removing that whole scenario that everything in the cereal aisle is white.
Okay, so you said at the outset that this regulatory framework was part of our advantage, but I think you're also getting to the fact that sometimes these regulations can be how we could lose that advantage.
Totally.
But changes are happening,
Yeah.
and so we're doing the right things. Our leaders are doing the right things.
Slowly. I mean, time will tell. And as entrepreneurs and governments sort of do this dance together, well, that's the key, though.
Right.
We are doing this dance together, right? Which I think allows us to keep moving ahead. The balance is not to over-regulate, because then the business can't grow. It can't become a consumer-focused industry. And I think government is starting to realize, yeah, you know what, we got to let some of these things happen. And then from a public perception and public demand perspective, Kent, I think what people are starting to get over, and you and I were talking before the camera started, was like families, business associates, me and my colleagues at MNP,
Right.
me and my kids, we're having open conversations about cannabis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's stop you on that, because
Yeah.
I've talked about some of my colleagues around the soccer field, people who are in business.
Yeah.
They would gladly tell business colleagues that they have some affiliation with, but they don't know too well, hey, let's go get a beer. But they wouldn't likely say, hey, let's go, light up a joint
Yeah.
with them. They still wouldn't suggest that, even though they might want to.
Yeah.
Is that changing societally?
It is. It's changing just because legalization allows that to change. It's no longer about dime bags in the back alley, right? It's, over time, the people who've been driving this industry from a black market, the really bad people, are starting to realize that they have to get out. The good people who are in this industry, as a cottage industry, are running a pretty good business for their family, and they weren't toting guns or anything. They're realizing, you know what, can I do this in the legal framework? And many of them are choosing to switch, which is wonderful.
So I would think as the sort of stigma starts to fade away, this is going to cause an additional sort of surge, I think, for the industry. Most people watching this, though, will never be specifically directly involved in the industry. What they might do is invest in it.
Yeah.
So where are the opportunities?
Well, let me talk to you about the soccer thing before I talk about the opportunities.
All right.
So you and your buds finish. We've all done that, right? You're playing a beer league.
Yeah.
You just scored the ultimate Ronaldo, or
Right, fat chance.
That's okay. There's hope for guys like you and me. Right? Probably more for you than me. And you're sitting on the sideline, and you already know you're sore, you're out of breath, etc. Do you know that there's research being done now with high performance athletes in cannabinoids? CBD, for example, in terms of athletic recovery. So people walking off the pitch with the CHP, Cannabis Health Products, I could see people going, you know what? Rather than have a beer and rather than smoking, because I just ran and, you know, do I want smoke in my lungs?
Right.
Taking a chewable vitamin. You go to your Costco and you see racks of these chewables for all kids, calcium, blah, blah, blah. I could see that coming, and that could be 2020.
Right.
Right?
Okay.
And it's perfectly normal. It's like an infused Gatorade, frankly.
Right.
Yeah.
So one more avenue for cannabis companies to succeed in talking people into using that after an athletic endeavor.
Yeah.
But investing, you know, one person who knows more about investing than I ever will suggested to me as we started to get into this industry that investing in the cannabis production end of things, ultimately you're financing farming. And in the long run, there's no big money to be made there. It could be solid, but the real opportunities are in the diversification of all of the applications for it. Would you agree as a general rule that there's more opportunity at that end?
I think the person who gave you advice gave you really good advice. I think if you're coming to the game now and doing investment in grows, there's got to be a compelling reason why that cultivation model is better than anybody else's. The number of business plans that cross my desk that says, hey, I have a property. Hey, I have a master, I know this guy, usually it's a guy, that used to grow. He's going to be my master grower. Hey, I have a banker, lawyer involved. Hey, you know, but I've seen so many of those. I've seen so many in very nascent stages, and I've seen some of those grow up to be some of the biggest cannabis companies in the world, which is wonderful. But it's mid-2019. We've been legal for 9 months, right? Edibles is coming in 4 months, 3 to 4 months. Probably won't appear in the store shelves until the end of this year, early 2020. Where is the industry going? If you understand edibles, the switch from consumption of smoking to everything else, I call cannabis 2.0 the emergence of everything else. Right? So whether it's a beverage, I mean, Canopy, the world's largest weed company, has a huge investment in beverages, right? Through their Constellation partnership. Those things are moving. If you understand that, a lot of the stuff that's being grown is going to get crushed, squished, and extracted. Okay, so if that's an input ingredient, it's not the end product, it's the input ingredient, it's got to be acceptable quality, so Health Canada regs and tested, you know, no pesticides and stuff like that. So that'll be fine. That's the reality of our existing framework. Wonderful. But it's got to be low cost because it's an input ingredient into somebody making something else. Right? So if that's the case, what's that going to do in terms of the cultivators, their revenue, and their profit? It's going to lower that. And the reality of doing that well is you got to do it on massive scale. Right? So outdoor grows are being licensed now. That's massive. All that stuff is not high-end weed. That stuff's getting grown to be extracted. So then, think about the players. The extractors are going to do very well in the near term because there is not enough capacity for extraction.
So it sounds like you would sort of see the advantages in being companies that are going into these fields, but that have the enough size to themselves that they can go on to a larger scale. Some small operation that thinks they've got the magic ticket might be a little more dangerous.
Well, I think if you're in cultivation, for sure. There's an emerging class called the craft cultivator, and especially in BC, that'll be a wonderful area. But again, it will be very hard to figure out who's going to dominate, who's going to make money.
Yeah.
And there's also Indigenous participation coming in, which is wonderful. But again, where is that value proposition? Where do they scale and make money? In Cannabis 2.0, the reality is extraction, testing, value-added manufacturing, and then those cultivators who have supply chains that can get product to market. It is, what I've been saying to people is, it's no longer about tell me about your idea, it's show me. So we're going from tell me to show me. And if you're an investor, you're thinking of deploying capital, understand the show me and see how they're executing along that. I'll give you another example. If you are a edibles manufacturer, now at the end of the day, whether it's baked goods or chocolates, you are a food processor. Yes, under Health Canada regime for cannabis, but you're a food processor. What are the specific key success factors for a food processor? You have to have formulation and test kitchen. You better have machinery, and therefore the capital. You better have packaging, you better have input ingredients, supply chain lockdown, and you better have outbound logistics and customer-facing supply chain lockdown. Oh yeah, and that's in cannabis, right? You see,
Right, yeah.
I talked about, it could have been
Yeah.
any business, food processing business, but in cannabis. So if you can pick some of those out and see where they're iterating, the tricky part is the licensing, because you can't do anything without a license.
Yeah.
But Health Canada won't let you apply for a license until you have your facility built.
I know. It's you have to go out on a limb to fit into this regulatory.
Another cliche I've been using: thick skin and thick wallets. If you want to be in this business, that's where you
Yeah.
know, the early days of, I got an idea, I'm going to apply for a license, and you get a little chunks of funding, and people come in, friends and family,
Right.
the $1 round. Those days, unfortunately, are not likely to reappear.
We'll see where it goes over the next year. Will you come back and talk to us then?
Totally.
Awesome. Peter
Yeah.
Guo, Myers Norris
Thanks, Ken.
Penny, and thank you for watching Kelowna Now.